Good morning. Today, we're going to have a conversation and discussion about the upcoming holiday of
Purim.
Purim. I thought you were going to say Pesach.
Not ready. Please.
So, is everyone familiar with the Purim story, or should we do a brief review? It's up to you. I don't mind doing a brief review, but is everyone familiar, or should we do a quick, or should we do it as I go along? I'll refer to the story.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Great.
Yeah? You like
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that's good. So we'll do it that way. So I want to pose a few questions to you. I hope you'll share and you'll get involved. Is the story of Purim a tragic story? Queen Esther, is it a tragic story? What happened to Queen Esther?
Yeah, she
Is
was
Go ahead.
house. The ending isn't beautiful for her. So I think it's horrible. I think about it all the time.
Okay. So you feel bad for Queen Esther that she was stuck in
Yeah,
the palace of the king.
it's all.
Okay. Okay. You have to be honest what you feel. Or could you say it's a joyous story? There was a terrible decree against 127 nations of Jews. You know, the entire world was run by Persia, by King Ahasuerus. You
No,
could have run away. Even, I mean, I don't want to compare to the Holocaust, but the Holocaust, if a Jew was able to escape, let's say, to America, you were safe. But there, where are you going to escape to? He's running the country. He's like the Hitler of that generation. I want to read you something very interesting my daughter sent me. I forgot I wanted to open with this, but let me give me 1 second. It's so fascinating because of current events. You see how what Bayam Mahem Bisman Hazeh. What happened then is happening now. Listen to this. Someone pointed this out. Netanyahu was meeting with the Prime Minister of India. Herzog, president of Israel, was meeting with the president of Ethiopia. May Haidu, it says in the Megillah, at Kush. From India to Ethiopia, Achashverosh ruled. It's no coincidence that now in our current events, two dignitaries from Israel are meeting with Mehaidu Viat Kush. Just an interesting tidbit somebody just sent me this morning. So 127 nations were under the decree that on the 13th day of Adar, every man, woman, and child would, God forbid, be wiped out. But we know that the Jewish people were saved. So I want to pose a few questions to you that we're going to bring up for discussion. And if you have an answer, please feel free. This is supposed to be a conversation, a discussion. I don't mind listening to you talk. It's all good. So first of all, what is the book that we read on Purim twice? So Monday night, we're going to read it once. And then Tuesday, during the day, you read it again. So we're obligated, one of the mitzvahs of Purim is to hear the reading of the
Megillah.
Megillah, the ganze Megillah. Now, what is the Megillah called? Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther. Now, let me ask you a question. Wasn't Mordechai, her husband and the chief rabbi at the time, also part of the miracle of Purim? He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Why isn't it called the scroll of Esther and Mordechai or Esther? Why is it only called the scroll of Esther? Right? Why isn't it called, for example, the scroll of Purim? Isn't the holiday Purim? Right? Yet it's called the scroll of Esther. Then there's another interesting thing in the Code of Jewish Law when it tells you the laws of Purim. It says that if you read the Megillah backwards, let's say you go to shul and you read it backwards, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. Like, okay, who reads the Megillah backwards? What is that law all about? What does it mean if you read it backwards? You know, it's funny because when in the olden days, used to get magazines And my family would laugh because I would always read the back and then go to the front. They go, Ma, why? I'm like, it's more interesting for me. I like to go against the flow. They expect you to read the first page, but I would read it backwards. Okay, whatever. So, what is this code of Jewish law? If you read the Megillah backwards, you haven't fulfilled the obligation of reading the Megillah. And then there's another very strange question. If you read Megillah Esther, let me ask you a question. How many times is God's name mentioned? Where does it say Hashem, Adoshem, Elokim? How many times?
0, right?
Very good. Never. Now, you know that the book of Esther is part and the last book that seals off the written tradition. We have the oral tradition and the written tradition, the 5 books of Moses, the books of the prophets, and the writings, Megillah Esther included. The last of the books is the scroll of Esther. How could it be that something that's part of the Torah tradition, the written Torah tradition given at Sinai, does not have God's name mentioned even once? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Why isn't God's name mentioned even once? God made a miracle. God got rid of the decree. And this is part and parcel of the Torah tradition that we have. Another weird question. And let me ask you something. When there was the beauty contest, right? King Achashverosh kills his wife Vashti. Besides, we're going to go into the emotional, psychological babble of Achashverosh had a very deep-seated insecurity because his wife was the daughter of royalty. She came from the royal blood. Nebuchadnezzar was her grandfather. Her husband was a layman. For whatever reason, she married him. I don't know, she fell in love with him. He was a knight in shining armor. Who knows? So he had a very, very deep-seated insecurity, Achashverosh. So we'll explain more a little bit how it comes to play. So what was I saying? So, okay, so that's the question, is why is God's name not mentioned? Oh, so I was saying, so maybe Queen Esther, he's looking for a queen, right? There's a beauty pageant. You'll say, who wouldn't want to be queen? All that money, all the publicity, you're going to be on the front page of social media. Who wouldn't want to be queen? Maybe Esther liked the idea of being chosen as queen. You could say maybe far-fetched, but yeah. So to this morning, I want to analyze all these questions and bring it all together, and also explain what was the true sacrifice of Queen Esther. You know, I was growing up, we learned the story of Purim every year, right? In elementary school, yeshiva high school, even yeshiva college, I learned it. But later on, when I started to study it, to teach it, I realized and uncovered, based on Jewish mysticism, Hasidus, and Kabbalah, the real story of Queen Esther, and as Sarah mentioned, the tragedy of her life, what happened. Tragedy on one hand, but on the other hand, her heroism. She is the quintessential heroine and role model for every woman for all generations. And that's what we're going to analyze today, because I feel it's so relevant to our lives. It's so important. You know, we look at history and say, history is what happened. But we as Jews know, Ezehu Chacham, Haroes HaMoled. Who is wise, says Ethics of Our Fathers, those who see the future. We don't look at history, history, been there, done that. Our history, our past history is our future history. And it's foolish for us not to look at the world and see what can past history, our history, teach us for the future. Not to wallow in pain, not to wallow in the misery or the persecutions, but rather to gain strength from our history. That's why we discuss history. We are not, remember, I always say, we are not the victims, we are the victors. We weren't sent, we weren't sold into slavery by our brothers, we were sent there. We have a reason we're here. And we're going to see it throughout here with the story of Purim and Queen Esther. So now let me start with why it's called Megillas Esther. Does anybody have any insight? Even something simple. Go ahead, please share. And what else is called Esther? We do it on Monday before Purim, the day before Purim. What is it?
Fast. The fast.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. The fast of Esther. So the day before Purim is the fast of Esther. The Megillah is called the scroll of Esther.
Wasn't she
Go ahead.
supposed to, even though Mordecai was a cousin, wasn't she supposed to marry him? And she had the most to sacrifice. She sacrificed the most out of everyone you mentioned.
Very
So she
good.
had the most to lose. And she was stuck really in this shackle of life. She didn't want to be Queen Esther. She didn't want to be married to the king. So,
Excellent.
as
Excellent.
and all that, all of the things they could have done to her if they found out, and how manipulative it really was, and how yes, she saved the day. So she was the heroine, but she really gave up her life as she thought she was going to have it.
Excellent, Jane. Excellent. I couldn't have said it better. As we'll soon see, as much as Mordechai contributed to the miracle, because he was the Nasi Adar, the Rebbe, the prophet of the generation, we cannot minimize the greatness of Mordechai, but Esther is the one that was stuck in the palace. And we'll soon see she gave up the ultimate sacrifice. Remember, Mordechai was on the outside. He was still able to go to shul every day and hang out with the Jewish people. It's Esther who's locked into the palace situation, mentally, physically, not mentally, but physically. So it's called Megillas Esther because we'll soon see the true heroism and self-sacrifice is from Esther. Now, Jane touched on something very important. It says in the Megillah, Bas died. He adopted her because she was an orphan. She was the daughter of his uncle, which means she's his first cousin. But did you know it says Labayit, he took her to his house, and the Medrash says he was married to Esther. Esther was Mordechai's wife. Knowing this now, you realize she was forced to go to the palace, which a prophetess, a holy woman, married to the Mordechai, the Moses of the generation, would want to be taken into the palace to compete in a pageant. What is she? How would you even suspect her? And the Torah emphasizes she comes from the tribe of Benjamin. The Benjamin tribe is known for their modesty. And her name connotes modesty. Her name, Esther Hi Hadassah. Now, we're not talking about the Hadassah Women's Organization here. Hadassah is the myrtle. What's a myrtle? A myrtle looks like a closed lips, showing that Hadassah Esther was not only physically gorgeous, she was very modest, like closed lips. So knowing who Esther was now explains to us there's no way she wanted to be part of the Kardashians, Achashverosh's life. There's no way she wanted to be in that depraved place where he had a harem, and the Medrash explains a different woman every night that he stole from husbands or families. He didn't care who they were. That's his power. As a matter of fact, when she's forced into the palace, Chagai, who's the head of the harem and oversees all the women in the king's palace, realized something so different from this girl, from this woman. She doesn't ask for anything. All the women were asking, I want jewelry, I want clothing, I want makeup, I want spa treatments. Esther, nothing. He realized something different, so he gave her her own set of apartments. And that's how she was able to keep kosher. They said that Esther had a different maid for every day of the week. Why? So when it came Shabbos, the maid of Thursday and Friday did not know that she acts differently on Shabbos than the rest of the week. They had nowhere to compare. One maid would wonder, like, oh, why is my mistress acting this way on Friday and differently on Shabbos? They didn't compare notes because it was a different maid every day of the week. That's how it prevented anyone from finding out that she was Jewish. Because remember, Mordechai said, don't tell anyone who you are. Keep it a secret. And she didn't question. And why didn't she question is because the whole situation that she was put in was so bizarre, mind-boggling, out of the ordinary, strange, and she as a prophetess realized something is going on. Why would God put me in this predicament? Something is going on, so she kept quiet. She didn't say, well, no, why should I tell them? Maybe you don't know what's going on. She understood something is going on. She understood that that there's a reason she's in the palace. There's a reason he chose her of all the girls. You don't think there's anyone prettier than Esther? She was beautiful, okay, but there's no other beauties in the world. On the runways, you'll have 25 gorgeous models. There's no other gorgeous girls. But what Achashverosh saw in Esther was not even the external beauty. There was an internal beauty he saw. And when you see internal beauty, you can't move away from that. I don't know if you ever met somebody like that, like Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, who I spoke about, had that special godly energy. You can't even put your finger on it. It's something you're attracted to because it's so spiritual and holy. And that person is externally beautiful because it just reflects. That's Queen Esther. And she's married to Mordechai. So tragedy one for her is that she has a happy married life, and now she can't be with her husband. Think about it. Put it in perspective. Think about Hitler forcing a Jewish woman to be his wife. Think about that. And because she is married to this barbarian, brutal killer, she saves 127 nations of Jews. She's put into a very, very difficult situation, but look at the result. She saves everybody. So going back why it's called Megillas Esther, and we'll talk more about what she did, is because, first of all, the true sacrifice of Purim was Esther. As much as the Jews sacrificed and felt the pain of being, God forbid, exterminated by Haman and the armies, the true sacrifice was Esther. So it's called Megillas Esther, the scroll of Esther. Why the fast of Esther? Because who tells Mordechai about the fast? Mordechai comes to the Esther, right? They communicate through messenger. He says, Esther, do you know what? Esther asks him, why are you wearing sacks of mourning? And he says, you didn't hear about the decree? She says, no, I'm in the palace. I don't get the newspaper. He says, it's a decree that a year from now and 11 months from now, this was right before Pesach, the decree was enacted, all the Jews are going to be killed. Now go to the king, tell him who you are and save us. So Esther says to Mordechai, Leich kanes kol Yehudim, gather all the men, women, and children and declare a 3-day fast. So it's Esther who tells her husband, the chief rabbi, the chief rebbe, the chief sage, to go declare a fast and gather the Jews in prayer and repentance. Now you would think the rabbi says to the queen, to his wife, honey, you go to the king, talk to the king, I'll go pray. Look how it's so interesting. He tells Esther, go to the king, use diplomacy, and Esther tells her husband, go pray and fast. So you see the energy of the Jewish woman here? You think, who is always responsible for prayer, fasting, and spiritual endeavors? The chief rabbi, the chief sage, Mordechai. Yet it's Esther who's trapped in the palace. And though she's isolated from her people, you would think she knows the pulse of what needs to be done. You would say, how would Esther, she's cut off, she's in the palace over 5 years. By the way, she wasn't in the palace. When we read the story, it seems like it just happened, right? There's a beauty contest, she's chosen, there's a decree, and boom, they fight and they win. No, it took over 5 years before Esther the Jewish nation was able to celebrate what we call the holiday of Purim. So you would say she's so disconnected from her people. What does she know about what to do? She right away realized that the reason there is the decree because there's a lack of unity among the Jewish people. They're disconnected from each other. Something's going on here, she says. We need to bring everyone together. The men, the women, the children fast and call out to God. This is what she tells Mordechai. So think of the depth of Queen Esther.
How old was she supposed to be? Wasn't she very young?
I think at the time of the story, I read she was 37 or 40. She was no youngster, which is another reason the Medrash says that was miraculous that Achashverosh chose her. Surely he wanted a 17-year-old. Not to compare it to what's going on now in our world of corruption and horrific files that we shall not be mentioned and we shall not want to read because I have nightmares from it.
Didn't something happen to her then in her early teens?
Esther?
Yeah.
In what way?
I don't know. I thought that is exactly what happened to her in her early teens.
Well, Esther was an orphan. So you mean
Yeah.
she was orphaned.
Yeah.
She was raised by Mordechai and then Mordechai married her. Okay, she was also his first cousin, Bas Doi, the daughter of his uncle. They're first cousins. So, I mean, being an orphan is horrific enough. I mean, this is beyond that level of what happened to her. But also remember that Queen Esther, even though we all have Queen Esther within ourselves, we have that feminine energy. Queen Esther, a prophetess. We have to remember who she was. Very interesting thing happens. As she comes into the palace and she's chosen, to her horror, King David quotes her in the Psalms. Keli, Keli, lama zaftani, it says in the Psalms, where a person calls out to God, 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 why did you desert me? So when we read the Psalms, this is a very popular psalm. Comes the commentaries and say this refers to Queen Esther. She comes into the palace, and because it's such a depraved place, she feels the divine presence leaves her. Her prophecy leaves her. The Shekhinah leaves her, which means the divine presence. She calls out, Kaylee, God, why did you leave me? Did I ask to be put here? You sent me here. Why are you deserting me when I need you most? She calls out to Almighty God in pain. So the commentaries say this is Esther calling out to God. The passage that King David writes about is referring to Queen Esther, where she says, why did you desert me at this time? This is when I really need your presence. If I chose to be here, that's on you. But she didn't choose. God sent her there. Just like with Joseph, remember we discussed, was I sold or was I sent? She knows she's sent. She doesn't know why yet, but she's sent. And it says in the Kabbalah that this was the end of the prophecy for the Jewish people. When it indicates that this prophecy left her, the Shekhinah left her, and this is the last book of the written tradition, the commentary, the Mefarshim and Hasidus explains this was the end of the prophecy, revealed prophecy with Esther. It stopped. So it's also an indication of what's to come when she calls out. So let's go back to the conversation between Mordechai and Esther. So Mordechai comes to Esther and he says to her, now is the time to reveal your identity. Go and plead on behalf of your people. So she says to Mordechai, you know that if I go to the king, I could be beheaded because there's a new edict from the king. The king was so paranoia that it was going to be an assassination against him. Remember, because there was a plot of his two servants, Bigshon and Viserys, try to kill the king. Mordechai overheard the plot because he spoke 70 languages and they spoke a different language. They said, the rabbi doesn't speak our language. And he sends a message to Esther, go tell the king there's a plot to kill him. So she goes to the king, she tells him, and he's saved. So now he's paranoia. He makes a rule, no one could come to me unless you're summoned. So Esther says to Mordechai, I haven't been summoned for a very long time. If I show up at the inner chambers of the king, and the king does not stick out his scepter that I'm allowed to come in, you are immediately beheaded, even though I'm the queen. So now Mordechai says to her the pivotal words that really is one of the most powerful lessons of the Torah and the Megillah. The Jewish people will be saved, he says. The question is, will it be done through you or through somebody else? You have the opportunity now to be the one through whom God's blessings and miracles will come. To repeat, what Mordechai is telling Esther and for all generations, we are put into moments, carpe diem. Are we going to seize that moment? Or say, listen, it's too dangerous. Someone else could do it. I don't have time for this right now. I'm not in that situation. I used to be in that situation. I don't know if my family will let. I don't know if my husband will let. I don't know if my wife will agree. So the response, Mordechai says, will it be through you or will it be through someone else? When God wants something to happen, it happens. The question is, will it be through me and you or will someone else have to take on the job? So Mordechai says something to Esther, which is really the call to every one of us. When you are given a moment, a fork in the road, will you seize the opportunity presented to you or not? So when Esther hears those words, she says, yes, I'm going to go to the king. But you go, gather the Jews and pray, because she realized you need diplomacy, of course. You're not supposed to sit with folded hands and say, okay, we won't talk to the king. We won't plead on behalf of my people. We know we need diplomacy. But more importantly, or equally important, is you need to pray to God and do spiritual remedy, spiritual intervention, repentance. It goes hand in hand. So when I was a little girl, we were taught, what was the sacrifice of Esther? That she almost could got killed, right? Had the king not stuck out her scepter, she would be killed. The fact that she went and the king let her into his inner chamber was the miracle. That was her sacrifice. That was what they taught us as little girls, because to say the whole story, how Mordechai was her husband, and so on. But now let me take this one deeper. So what does she say to Mordechai when he says, okay, I'm going to do the fast, I'm going to do the gathering of the Jews to prayer? Avadati, avadati. I'll go to the king, but lost, I will be lost. Why did she say double loss? She could say, avadati, I might be lost, I might be killed. She says, avadati, avadati, lost, I will be lost. And these two words give us the total picture of the true self-sacrifice of Esther. When she says, avadati, avadati, so I always say, there's the song, which means I'll be lost for emphasis. I'll be killed, I might be killed. That's nice. But you want to understand the real meaning, you need the harmony of the song, the medrash, the insight, chassidus, mysticism. She says, avadati, avadati. If I show up at the door of the king and he lets me in, what is he going to think? I'm there for intimacy. All the months, all the years that she lived with Achashverosh, she never had intimacy willingly with him. It was forced. It was forced on her. Now she shows up at the door. The king sees her. What is he thinking? Oh my gosh, she wants to be intimate with me. She's coming to me. So when he opens the door and he sees his beautiful Queen Esther, and the measures describe, she had a glow. She had a special glow. He sticks out his scepter. And he says, my beloved wife, half of my kingdom, what do you want? I'll do whatever you want. He can't believe his luck that she came to him to be intimate with him. That's how he looks at it. So she says to her husband Mordechai, avadati, avadati. I can never come back to you as a wife again. Because halacha is if you willingly have intimacy out of the marriage is over. You have to get divorced. Before, she was forced. So she was allowed to return to Mordechai. It's a complex halacha.
Wow.
But now she's willingly going to the king to save her people. She can never go back to her marriage, even if the king tosses her out tomorrow. And avadati, what's the second avadati? By doing this, I lose my share in the world to come. There's no Gan Eden for me. There's no Garden of Eden after this because I've committed a sin. I not cheated on my husband, but I acted out of the marriage. So the tragedy or the self-sacrifice, tragedies may be negative, but the self-sacrifice of Esther is way beyond what people understand. She gave up everything. She can never go back to Mordechai, have children with him. But she saves her people. She saves her people. And the Shekhinah returns to her in the palace. So this is the ultimate sacrifice of Esther. Now, when she announces the two feasts, right? Remember, how does she get him to annul the decree? She doesn't go into the chamber, okay, honey, I'm Jewish. Let's annul the decree. She makes a feast. And he can't believe it. His wife is making a feast for him. And she invites Haman too. And then she makes a second feast and invites Haman too. He can't believe his lucky stars, the king. Wow, my wife is going all out for me. And then she reveals who she is and gets Haman hung and so on, without all the details. So it's not like, she came and said, hi, darling, I'm Jewish. Guess what? She had to make she was brilliant. She created a whole plan. So why am I bringing this up? Because what are the Jewish people hearing out of the palace? We're suffering. We're under the threat that in 11 months from now, we're going to all be killed. And look at our Jewish queen. She's making feasts. She's partying with Hitler, with Haman. Yamach Shammai. They looked at Esther as a traitor. So she suffered from every side. She was with the depraved king and Haman. Her own people rejected her, called her a traitor, because she couldn't reveal her plot. She couldn't tell the Jewish people, tell everyone in shul and in the mikvah that I'm really making a plot, She had to keep it top secret. So in the Jewish countries, everyone wrote her off as a traitor. She betrayed us. She stabbed us in the back. We're under a terrible decree. We're shivering in our boots that we're going to be killed in a couple of months. And look at our queen, the Jewish girl. She is creating feasts and partying. So you have to understand what's going on over here. She's looked at as a traitor by her own people. In the palace, she's walking on eggshells. Who knows what could happen to her when she tells Achashverosh, I'm Jewish. And she can't go back to Mordechai ever again. So you understand who she is now, the special Queen Esther, the prophetess. She rises above everything because she has one focus in mind. I must save my people. I must save the future of the Jewish nation, the men, the women, and the children. Had a Jewish woman known that if she marries Hitler, Yamach Shammai, or Eichmann, and she could have saved 6 million Jews. Think about that in that perspective. That's what it is here. She saves 127 nations, the entire world practically, except for the moon, of Jews who should have, God forbid, been exterminated on the 13th day of Adar. Instead, they were allowed, by the way, she wasn't even able to take away the edict. Once the king gives out an edict, it's etched in stone. The only thing the Jews were allowed to do was defend themselves, take up arms. And that's how they won, with God's help. Because they weren't trained soldiers. So she accomplished what they were able to fight back and win. But the edict remained for 11 months. The Jews were shivering, we're in horror. What are we going to do? It's over for us.
Did she have children?
Esther?
Didn't she have one son with the king?
Very good. So when she was intimate with the king, they had Darius the third. And Daryavish, and some Medrash says no, but some Medrashim say yes, he was their son, and he was the one that initiated the rebuilding of the second temple because he was Jewish. He had a Persian father, but he was Jewish. He was a Jewish boy.
That was more she even gave.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Let's mull this over, and then I'll add a few more points, a few very powerful points, but let's mull it over a little bit. Because it's a lot of material, I'm sorry, but you need to paint a picture of what went on here.
You know how you're allowed to break Shabbos if you're saving someone's life?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have applied, like, not going to Gadan Eden and not having to get a divorce because she saved all these lives and rebuilt the temple through her son. And,
He didn't rebuild, he started.
why was she so, right? Okay, so why was she, you know what I mean? Like, did she have to be so punished?
Okay, so
Maybe there just wasn't enough time, I guess, for everything.
No. It's a very difficult question. I don't have the full answer. Al pi halacha, she was not permitted back to her husband because she went to the king willingly. That's the straight law. Are there nuances? I don't know. I think if I was Queen Esther and I wanted to go back, I would have to ask the rabbis what to do. But that's basically the story, that's part of the self-sacrifice, or even the ultimate self-sacrifice. Like my brother teaches a class, my brother Yosef Yitzhak in Muncie, and he told me that after one of his classes, a woman told him that every time she sits down on Purim to the feast, she's depressed. He says, why? She says, because I just think about Esther and I get all depressed. Everyone is rejoicing after the miracle of Purim. Everyone is feasting, and Esther is stuck in the palace. And that's right. That's exactly what happens. So again, even when you bring it back to the story of Joseph, that he was sold by his brothers and endured the years in prison, but then became viceroy of Egypt and saved the world from hunger, being called to this level of self-sacrifice, first of all, you have to be an Esther on that level of a prophetess. And second of all, yes, at times Almighty God calls us to do something that's so irrational, illogical, and you can't wrap your brain around it. That's why when Mordechai speaks to Esther, the Kabbalah says something very powerful. I want to share this with you because I think you'll appreciate it. He says to her, Mi idea, who knows why you were sent to the palace? Now, when you read this, again, when you read the story, you have to really study it. Because when you read the book, it's like a novel. There's espionage, there's plots, there's a beauty pageant, there's mystery, there's intrigue, there's feasts. It actually reads like a very exciting novel, bestseller. You have to really analyze it to see what happened. He says, me idea. You say, oh, he's being frivolous. He's saying, who knows why he was sent here? It may sound like that, but he's saying, me idea. Who can use logic to understand this, he tells Esther. It's not logical. You can't wrap your brain around what's happening to you, Esther, or to the nation. But this is what has to be. So the whole story, if you think about it, it's not logical. Doesn't make sense. You can read it like a simple novel, and then it makes a lot of sense. Of course, Mordechai just happened to be sitting there when they plotted to kill the king, and he just happens to speak 70 languages. Now, Queen Esther was beautiful, so of course she gets chosen to be queen. Right? So you could make a lot of logical analysis here, how the story works very logically. But if you analyze it, you see the story's not logical at all. That's why it's called Megillat Esther. Esther comes from the word hiddenness. Where in the Torah does it allude to Purim? God says to Moses, and Ani Aster Panai Bayamahu, I will hide my face on that day, he tells Moses. And the commentaries say what day? Purim. In the Megillah, God's name is hidden. It's never mentioned. Only when it says Melech, king. The king couldn't sleep. God couldn't sleep. The king asks for his book, his diary. Remember that part in the story? The king couldn't sleep. King says, bring me my diary. Who didn't I reward? The king looks and says, oh, you know that Jew that foiled the plot against me? I never gave him a reward. Bring in who's around. Oh, Haman just happened to be outside, hovering because he came there to ask the king to kill Mordechai. And then God, Achashverosh says, Haman, what would you do to someone who did me a favor? And Haman thinks it's him. He says, oh, I would dress him in the king's clothes and I would lead him on a horse through the streets of Shushan and call out, this is the man the king wants to reward. He says, okay, go take Mordechai and do it to him. And he has a heart attack, right? Remember that part of the story? Now, it says the king couldn't sleep. God couldn't sleep. The tide turns. God. The tide turns in the hand of God. So every time it says Melech in the Megillah, it's referring to God. So now you know God's name is not mentioned externally. But if you read the Megillah, you will see God's hand in the whole Megillah, the ganze Megillah, which means the whole Megillah. And that's why it's called the scroll of Esther, the scroll of hiddenness, the scroll of concealment. The whole story is concealed. You got to analyze, you got to study it to realize what really happened here. And the hand of God, divine providence, is every step of the way. Esther didn't just happen to be chosen. Mordechai didn't just happen to be sitting there. Haman just didn't happen to be hanging out in the hallway of the king's chambers. The king didn't just happen to read his diary suddenly. Zugesund.
Thank you.
So Megillah's Esther, the scroll of concealment, the scroll of hiddenness. You know, like we say, where's God in the story? If you read it properly, God is everywhere. And that's what the Code of Jewish law says, that if you read it backwards, what it's meaning, if you read this Megillah backwards, with a backwards attitude, like, what does this have to do with me? Nice story, exciting story, wonderful story, but it happened then. If you read this Megillah with an attitude that has nothing to do with me, then you are not fulfilling the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah on Purim. You have to read this Megillah and say, you know, what can I learn from this Megillah? How is it my life story? So I think we covered most of the questions. So let's do a summation of bring it all down to us. What are the lessons for life? Does anybody want to share?
Sacrifices.
Sacrifices. Carpe diem. When a moment comes in your life and you have to make a decision to do something that's good, don't hesitate. Think of Esther at that moment where Mordechai says to her, Mi idea, who knows if this is the reason you were sent to Weston, to Westport, to, to Main Street, right? This might be the reason I ended up in this place at this time. It might have taken 5 years to figure it out, 10 years, but when a moment comes and somebody wants to ask me, well, how do I know? You don't. But when a opportunity presents itself, always do a double take. Is this my moment? And it could be a very small thing. Not everyone is called upon to be Queen Esther. Sometimes your mission, your purpose is you might think it's small. It's really not small. But don't always feel like you're going to have to jump into the ocean on 10 below zero and that will be your sacrifice. Not everyone is called upon to jump out of an airplane and run and save lives that way. But Carpe Diem sees every moment because that might have been your Queen Esther moment.
you know,
You don't know. Mi idea. You can't always think of it logically. Who knows? Mordechai says, we don't understand this. This makes no sense, Esther, but it has to be done.
it also reminds me of, when Trump met with our enemies like North Korea and Putin, and, many of my friends who hate him no matter what he does.
Right.
Why is he talking to them? And like, well, what else are you supposed to do? Like invite your enemies to dinner to, almost get in there.
Yeah.
But if you don't speak to people, everything's going to stay the same, or you're just going to send missiles, which
Yeah.
might anyway right now with the Iranians. But, I guess
I always look at Trump as Achashverosh a little bit. He's involved with Haman, Iran. Let's see what happens. Listen, let me say something that very well said, Jane, that you don't know. I have to tell you a cute story. I was in Israel the first time Trump was elected. And when I got off the plane, I'm not exaggerating, I had 20 text messages because, in Israel, you don't get your text messages. You only get like WhatsApp. 10 of my friends from the area texting me, Freida, I'm ready. Literally, I'm going to say the way they said, I'm ready to take my life. I can't believe he was president. Horror, tragedy. I can't sleep. Every person I called back and I told them the story of Purim. Remember when Queen Esther was put into the palace?
Yeah, it's reminding me.
Okay. Remember when Achashverosh became king and Trump became, it's God's hands. It's out of your control. You vote the way you feel you want to vote. But at the end of the day, you know who will be president? Who God put into the presidency. We have to look at the world multidimensional. Simple dimensional is diplomacy, you vote, you do everything in your power to be a good citizen of the United States of America. But then remember, you're a Jew. And we as Jews have a higher level of looking at the world. We have belief and faith in a God, in divine providence, that you were put somewhere because you're meant to be there. Sometimes it's painful, traumatic, tragic, challenging, dark, but God sent you there for a reason.
I don't think he's like Achashverosh because he meets with our enemies. He meets with our enemies. Who else had the chutzpah to do that?
I didn't mean every way Achashverosh. I meant the world leader. That's what I meant. Of course, Achashverosh, we didn't have a chance to analyze it, but like I mentioned, a lot of things that happen is because there's deep-seated insecurities of who he was from, his roots. So there's a whole psychological backdrop. The Megillah, you could really study it in 5 sessions. There's so many stories. I couldn't share everything. I shared what resonates with me. I hope it resonates with you as well, of this, of how we could emulate a Queen Esther in our lives, be a Queen Esther in our own way. Never underestimate yourself. Never underestimate yourself. Believe in your hidden power. Embrace your destiny. Let your inner beauty shine. We're stronger together. I'm sharing some of the lessons. When in trouble, turn to Hashem, turn to God, and never lose hope. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Avadati, avadati. And hopefully our sacrifices will never, ever have to be on the level of Queen Esther. So I want to share the 4 mitzvahs of Purim. So Monday night, Monday's a fast. If you could fast, fast. If it's too difficult, don't. Give tzedakah instead. So Monday night, once you hear Megillah once it's nightfall. Tuesday, you hear Megillah again. Tuesday, you have a feast in the afternoon. Give tzedakah to 2 institutions, 2 people who need it, and give shalach manas. What's mishalach manas? It's food baskets, food. A can of soda and a hamantash, a Laffy Taffy and a cake. Any 2 different brachas, a bottle of wine and a bag of candy. Or you could be more elaborate. I mean, in Brooklyn, I can't even tell you, my parents would get 1,000 shalach manas to their home. and the house was packed. Every kind of shalach manis you could imagine. Bottles of wine and scotches and houses made out of chocolate and chocolate bars the size of Persia. My mother and father didn't know what to do. The doorbell rang an entire day and that shalach manis would come piling in. 2 food packets to 2 Jewish friends. Why? Because we're bringing unity. When you give a Jewish friend that you don't know or that you know, you say, I'll give you a little shalach manos. You'll say, what is this? You say, mishalach, sending manos portions. I remember when I moved here, the Rebbe sent us here 45 years ago to be the emissaries in Westport West and Wilton, Norwalk. So it was the first Purim. So my husband and I sat and packed beautiful baskets with a whole array of foods. And we began delivering them. Some people weren't home. So the phone rang. Freida, thank you so much for the Easter basket. It was beautiful. I'm like, Purim, but okay. Why did you bring me another lady? Why did you drop off a Purim basket, Rabbi? I'm not poor. I'm able to pay my bills. And the third call, which was, thank you for the food baskets. Very nice. What's the occasion? So these were 3 of the responses we got when we delivered the Purim baskets. So it was very interesting. But now Purim has become hopefully more accepted in the community. More people are celebrating, and it has become more of a part of our traditional lives, hopefully. So celebrate Purim, make a little feast. The shul is having many programs. You want to join us, Beth Israel Chabad. We're having Monday night breakfast and a little feast, Megillah reading. Tuesday morning, a brunch with Megillah reading. So if you want to come, Tuesday afternoon, there's going to be an adult party at the shul and the children and family parties at the Weston Senior Center, run by yours truly, for the family and children. And avail yourself. Go to our website if you want to know what Purim is all about, how to celebrate, where to celebrate. But become a Queen Esther this Purim. Hear the Megillah from a scroll. Give 2 shalach manos, give a little tzedakah, and you will connect to who you are. So that's my message for Purim, and a pleasure sharing a class today with all of you. And next week, same time, same place. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Thank you for